Hi everyone, it's Teresa Green from Slow Paths Wellness, and this is Wellness Wednesday. This month, February, is National Cancer Prevention Month, and so I'm going to try to make our Wellness Wednesdays about preventing cancer, especially from a Chinese medicine and functional medicine perspective. Now, I just looked up some statistics just to kind of get a little bit of a rough idea of the idea of cancer prevention, because coming from a natural health viewpoint, I have a very strong interest in this, especially since I'm also a cancer survivor and am working very, very much so in my own life to avoid any chance of recurrence of the cancer that I had. And if you look up statistics, it looks like as many as 50% of all cancers are considered to be preventable. And most of the ways of preventing them are things like being smart about your sun exposure, so getting sunlight, because sunlight can be very healthy for you, but also making sure that you're covering up and avoiding getting that really strongest exposure that can contribute a lot to skin cancers. Things like not smoking, things like not overindulging in alcohol, things like maintaining a healthy weight, things like avoiding toxic exposures to various chemicals that, especially ones that are what we call xenoestrogens, like a lot of the pesticides and things like that, that can cause hormone disruptions in our body that can cause cancers. And also, many people say keeping a healthy mindset can make a huge difference in the kinds of chemicals that your body makes that can help prevent cancer. So, as I said, some of the statistics say as many as 50% of all cancers are avoidable. I actually believe that someday we'll think that number is much higher than that. Even with my own cancer, when I look back and looked at the risk factors, I realized that even though I ate mostly healthfully, I was overweight, I was eating a lot more saturated fat and a lot fewer vegetables than I do now, and I was working on my stress management, but I still really had a lot of trouble with anxiety and stress and things like that. So I think that contributed. Now, that's not blaming the victim for getting cancer. That's saying that there are things we can do to protect ourselves. So I want to be very clear about that, because I know sometimes, especially in natural health circles, we're all so excited about the things you can do, that you can manage your health, that people can feel blamed for getting sick and feel like a failure because they got sick. When I say you can prevent possibly as many as half of your cancers, well, that means one half you can't. And in that case, what you're focusing on is trying to be as healthy as possible, so that if you do get something like a cancer or some other chronic illness, your body is able to adjust to that and manage it and survive it and be as healthy as possible in spite of that. And that's the incentive for healthy living. So some of the things that some of the sources that I'll have, or some of the things we'll do for Wellness Wednesday this month, include some of my favorite books. This one is called, it's going to be probably backwards, I'm not sure, depending on how the camera does it. This is Eat to Beat Disease by William Li. He's a researcher who actually helps in creating drugs to treat cardiovascular disease, diabetic illnesses, and cancer, because one of his specialties is how blood flows both to healthy tissue and to unhealthy tissue. But as part of his research, he also does a lot about which foods can also have effects on health and the benefits that they can give. So Eat to Beat Disease has a lot of the first overall health ideas, plus very specific things about specific foods and their exact actions on cells, and he has a whole section on cancer cells, on both foods that could possibly increase your risk of cancer and foods that can actually fight cancer and help you as if you actually have cancer, you're trying to fight it, or if you're trying to prevent it from happening in the first place. Another book that I absolutely love is called Radical Remission, and this is not a book that is talking about never looking at conventional cancer care or never receiving conventional cancer care. It's actually a book that goes through the most common attributes that people who had unexpectedly positive outcomes in their cancer diagnosis, regardless of the treatment that they had, whether their treatment was chemo or radiation or surgery or dietary changes or spiritual awakenings, anyone who had a remission or a unexpectedly positive outcome, even if they didn't have full remission. This Kelly Turner researched that and listed the things that these people had in common. And as we'll see as the month progresses, a lot of those, the general outline of those things is actually very similar no matter which source you look at. And then another book that I really, really like is called Anti-Cancer Living. And it is by Lorenzo Cohen and Allison Jeffries. They're a husband and wife couple. He has a PhD. He is, I believe, his PhD is in psychology, and she has a master's in education, and I believe there's a nutrition background in there. I'm not 100% positive about that. Let's just make sure. She's a former president of the MD Anderson Cancer Faculty and Family Organization and worked closely with Lorenzo Cohen, and his PhD. It's not going to tell me. But that's okay. Like I said, I believe it's psychology. But he's the head of the MD Anderson Cancer Center, or the integrative medicine section of the MD Anderson Cancer Center. And after he finished this book, he was actually diagnosed with, I believe, melanoma himself. So he ended up writing the book and living the book at the same time. And so he talks about things that can both reduce your risk of cancer, but if you have cancer, it can also help you get through the process of treatment better and improve your chances of survival from cancer regardless of the treatment options that you have. And there's one other book. I'm going to run real quick and see if I can find it. Just a second. So I'm not finding it, but another one is called The Blue Zones, and it's a book about places where people live longer and live healthier for longer periods of time around the world. And again, all of these books, in fact, I can't remember which one. I think it was Dr. Cohen, but also I believe Dan Butner, who wrote the Blue Zones Living books. They both commented on how the broad categories of what to do in order to prevent any illness, any chronic illness, cancer included, are basically the same. It's things like eating lots of vegetables, no matter what else is recommended. Meat, no meat, dairy, no dairy, wheat, no wheat, vegetables. Eating lots of vegetables. Avoiding foods that are overly processed. So avoiding things if it comes out of a box with lots of ingredients. I'm trying to remember what Mark Hyman, how he puts it, but he talks about that, about trying to eat foods that are one-word foods, broccoli, salmon, rice, not Cheetos with 18 million ingredients, or I guess I should say cheese puffs, so that I'm not picking on any one brand. And having a connection system so that you have friends and family who you feel supported by, or a therapist or a support group, or somewhere where you have that support. There's lots and lots of data about how much better people with chronic diseases and cancer very specifically is mentioned, how much better people do with a support network to deal with the stresses of dealing with an illness. Exercise, getting at least, I think most recommendations are at least around 30 minutes a day, and some have more specific recommendations, but just that helps keep your blood sugar managed, helps keep your blood flow going well so you have good circulation, and also has a lot of stress reducing properties. And another one is your stress management beyond your support system, just kind of how your outlook on life affects whether or not you're able to function well and feel in charge of kind of what's going on in your life. And when you're dealing with health, this is also extremely important. Again, there's research that strongly suggests that the people who come into life thinking, okay, I can handle this, I can work through this, I can solve this, I have things at my disposal, I'm not a victim who can't control anything coming at me. These are people who are much more likely to survive a cancer diagnosis and improve and be able to live after cancer in a way that's much healthier. Sleep and rest. More and more now, as I've read in some books where they actually say that having disturbed sleep is considered to be a risk factor for cancer. So proper rest is very, very important. So let's see, we have exercise, sleep, rest, support system, stress, and then the avoiding the toxic exposures. So that's, at least I know Dr. Cohen talks about the mix of 6. Everyone has their own little phraseology for that, but the basics are eating healthy, thinking healthy, resting healthfully, socializing healthfully, and avoiding the things that are bad. that are, just obviously not good for you. Getting a lot of chemical exposures for things that, if you're supposed to be wearing a mask for it or wearing gloves for it, try to avoid it as much as possible. And if your job or something requires you to have it, then talk to a functional medicine provider about some of the supplements and things you can take to help minimize that exposure's effect on your body. So this is and one more thing I wanted to make sure I got on Wellness Wednesday, talking about cancer prevention, is that cancer prevention, like cancer treatment, is one of those things that knowing the general principles is important, but also understanding that nothing is going to completely guarantee anything, whether you're talking about whatever cancer you're talking about, but also any other illness as well. There's no 100% guarantee for anything. So, like I know when I had endometrial cancer, I talked to my doctor about it. He would say, okay, well, here's the treatment we're suggesting. This is the odds that it gives you. And he's very clear about that. And so this is the same thing. While I believe that it's very important to have the positive idea that you can do things to decrease your risk of cancer, I want to be fair and to say that there is not anything we know of right now that can 100% decrease that risk. So that partly is so people will have empathy for people who have cancer, because I know I've talked to patients who I've helped in a supportive role for them as they're going through cancer treatment, who feel judged, especially if they have one of the cancers like lung cancer or something like that that's strongly associated with something like smoking. That's not what this is about. Preventing cancer is about preventing suffering and helping people who were not able to prevent it for whatever reason to be able to thrive and to be able to do as best they can under the circumstances. So this is a great Wellness Wednesday. This month we're going to work on any different things that can help prevent cancers, and we will try to help you with the healthy mindset, the healthy, optimistic, joyful view that cancer, like any chronic disease, is something that you have input in and that you can have an effect on whether you get it, or if you get it, how much it will impact your life. So have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week.